Okay, so what I wanted to talk about with you guys today, chat room, I thought about this yesterday. This is just general FGC theory and general FGC matchup talk. So yesterday I was playing Them's Fighting Herds, right? And while playing the game, I was playing Oleander, right? I was fighting against a bunch of different characters, and then I fought against Velvet, right? So Oleander's like a mid-range character with good buttons, and she has a fireball. And Velvet is like the zoner character, right? So as the game was loading and I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna fight against Velvet, in my brain I was like, okay, so my character is generally defensive or like in the mid-range kind of, but my opponent's character is like a dedicated zoner, right? So in this matchup, I will probably have to be the aggressor in this case. I'm going to have to be the one to force issues or like force situations and scrambles and get hits. And I realized when learning a game, a fighting game, any fighting game, when going into a matchup, those are the kinds of things that should be in your head when you're learning. So when the match is loading up, regardless of what character it is, you should be doing like a checklist in your mind and saying, okay, who is the aggressor and who is the defensive player, right? Who has to take more risks? And sometimes the answer is very simple. If you're playing Zangief against Dhalsim, you're like, well, I'm the aggressor. I got to get in, and this guy, he's going to be running. But if you're playing a matchup where the answer is not easy to figure out, or you have to like really think about it, like, am I the aggressor? Am I not the aggressor? Like, who has to approach here? Do neither of us fit nicely in that category? Are we both zoning characters? Or you could be playing two aggressive characters where one character has strong ways to keep out the other character, even though they're generally an aggressive character. You have to think about it, right? Even if you don't know the matchup super in depth, that's one of the ways you can start to form thoughts about how you're supposed to play the matchup. The next thing you want to think to yourself, what specific tools do I have to look for? Like, what is my opponent's win condition? Is there a specific range that they want to always be in? Is there a specific tool or thing that they want to land? How does my opponent win? And if you don't know the answer to that question, because you might not know, you might be like me learning a new game, you fight your opponent's character and you see what they do to win. Are they hitting you once and knocking you down and setting up strong offense? Are they trying to run away and just hit you with the projectiles and chip you down? Are they trying to stay in the middle of the screen because they have like a sweet spot where they have really strong ways to reach and hit you, etc., right? Like, those are important things to figure out in the matchup. What are their natural reactions when you stand in certain places? If you stand half a screen away, what are they doing or what are they looking for? Are they uncomfortable? Are they running? Are they trying to get out of that distance? If you're a quarter screen away, right, even closer, how does your opponent react? Do they become the aggressor in that situation? Do they have good tools to hit you there? Do they have to flee because they have nothing that's safe or strong in that area? You know what I mean? Thinking about these options as you play is very important. It's how you figure out what your opponent's character wants to do, even without having knowledge of specifics. Just thinking like, I think this range seems uncomfortable. They're always running when I'm there, so I should probably try to put myself in that range. This is the kind of stuff you can learn and ask yourself while fighting against someone else. You don't have to do specific research to understand this stuff. You can just fight against a character and be like, well, he doesn't like standing right there, so I can just assume that. The thing you ask yourself past that is, are there specific tools in this matchup that I need to use more often? Do I have a tool that my opponent will really struggle to deal with? Like throwing out Kami Drill from full screen against Manat might be a tool that maybe you don't want to do that much. You don't want to just throw out Spiral Arrow all the time against characters, but against Manat, it's very good. Why? Because her punishes are very weak for it or non-existent, depending on the spacing. And it gets you in. Perhaps that's not a move you want to use against Zangief, right? Because doing Raw Drill against Zangief means you get murdered. But doing Raw Drill against Manat is very good because the matchup's different. In one matchup, you're the aggressor, and in the other match, you're not. Yeah, DPing in neutral as Grand against Fairy is a great example. Mashing Sweep in neutral against Dhalsim or any kind of zoning character is probably going to be okay for you, right? Because they won't have strong punishes if your sweep misses, and if it hits, you might win the round. And when thinking about the way matchups break down and archetypes and stuff like this, I realized, again, this keeps happening to me, I realized that it reminded me of card games. And in card games, when the match starts, you often look at your opponent's deck and you think, is my opponent's deck fast? Is it slow? Is it mid-range? How does it play? What are they looking for? What are the things that I have to watch out for in this matchup, etc., right? So what I thought about was this really cool handy dandy graph. So if you guys follow card games at all, you might be familiar with Swim. He creates a bunch of cool content. In fact, he's streaming live on Twitch right now. And this chart has combo, aggro, control, mid-range, tempo value. This is explaining what different archetypes are good against once and what their goal is. This reminds me a lot of thinking about fighting game characters. Except instead of putting aggro, control, and combo, you can just put like rushdown, zoning, and grappler. And you can put mid-range character where mid-range character is. And mid-range characters stand in between rushdown and zoners, and their objective changes depending on the matchup, right? They're flexible characters. A mid-range character's goal against a rushdown character is to play slow and survive, right? You don't want to slug it out with this character. You want to play slow. If I'm fighting a zoner, if Ryu's fighting Dalsum, he is now the aggressor. He's a mid-range character that now has to approach because he's fighting against a character that is more defensive. So that's a character who is malleable, right? They play slow against fast characters. They play fast against slow characters. Tempo and value are card game terms. When you're creating tempo, you're generally putting stuff on the board that requires an answer. Your opponent has to do stuff to answer it, right? They can't just sit there and wait. Value is accrued by doing, like, you're playing them and they're winning you something that's more long-term, right? You know, if you play a card that draws more cards, right? That is value, but it's not creating tempo. Like building meter from full screen or something, right? By doing special move. That is value you're creating, but that's not doing anything on the screen to threaten your opponent. Anyway, tempo and value are more complex. Even in card games are more complex than anything else. It's an example. It's just a general thought out there about archetypes. In fact, in a lot of archetypes, control might lose the aggro, right? It might just be the opposite. Like in some games, zoners might always beat rushdown characters or whatever, right? This is an extremely vague example, right? It's never absolute. Zoners could lose to grapplers, right? Depending on the kind of grappler and depending on the zoner. Or a zoner could crush a grappler depending on the type of grappler and the type of zoner, right? It depends on your tools. But in general, charts like this and the archetype ideas that I'm bringing up are created to help you think, where does my character fall in line with this other opponent's character? Can I do examples from SF5 matchups? Yeah, let's use Cammy, Dalsum, and Zangief. There'll be Rushdown, Grappler, and Zoner in this instance, right? And we'll use Ryu as mid-range. Cammy, the Rushdown character, when fighting Dalsum, is the aggressor. She's generally going to be at advantage when going in against Dalsum. She has strong tools to get in, and the longer the match goes, the worse it is generally for Cammy. She needs to end the match quickly. In Dalsum versus Zangief, Dalsum is now at advantage, right? Because he's a zoner character fighting a grappler, and in that matchup, he can play very slow, and he has great answers to a lot of the stuff that Zangief's going to want to do to get in. In Zangief versus Cammy, Cammy is usually an aggressive character. She's the aggro character, right? However, in that matchup, she kind of doesn't really want to go in. A lot of her tools are about pressing forward, and Zangief has good answers to deal with what she wants to do. So she's a little bit more careful about heading in against Zangief than she would be against Dalsum, right? Now, in between the mid-range character, Ryu, against Cammy, Ryu will play slow, right? He is the defensive character here. He has the tools to play slow against Cammy. He has the fireball. He has the uppercut. When Ryu fights Dalsum, Ryu has to approach. He is now the aggressive character. He cannot afford to sit there and wait against Dalsum. The longer the match goes, the worse his tools are, right? He does not want to fight a grind against this character. Anyway, right? What would be the case for Narmaya versus Vasaraga? Okay. I just did a very long explanation of the general breakdowns of these things. What do you think would be the case of Narmaya versus Vasaraga? Where would you put those characters? There's a learning exercise. Narmaya's kind of like a mid-range character, right? She can play fast against zoners and play slow against rushdown characters, right? That's what she can kind of do. And Vasaraga would be more under the grappler playstyle, probably. It'd fit into like the big body or grappler archetype. In that matchup in particular, how good is her ability to zone, or how strong is her pressure when she gets in, right? The case is not all grapplers will beat rushdown like automatic, right? Some grapplers are very good on defense if you try to get in on them. So rushdown characters struggle against them a lot because generally rushdown characters don't have the tools to play a slow kind of defensive mid-range game, right? Generally, right? Like Street Fighter 4, the grapplers are so strong on defense. They're terrifying on defense because they have invincible backdash. They have extremely fast SPD. They have ultras that you can't jump post flash that deal 50%. Like you don't want to pressure them. In an anime game, right? For instance, like a lot of the times the grappler characters just get destroyed on defense. You know, you just rush them down, you do instant overheads, they're just stuck. This kind of chart or this kind of line of thinking, it's like a guideline. It's a way to get your brain thinking about the matchup. These general thoughts are thoughts that you can use to build on your matchup knowledge. The example I keep using is me learning Oleander, who is a mid-range character, and fighting against Velvet, right? So as a mid-range character, I was playing slow against almost every character that I fought. I'm fighting Tien, which is like Magneto. I'm fighting Arizona, who's trying to dash up and pressure and you know, has all this armored moves and stuff. And then I fight Velvet. Velvet's a character who's a dedicated zoner. I now have to approach. The way I played the matchup and the tools I used changed, right? In other matchups, like for instance, my TK Fireball was really good to keep people out. And now it became not as strong of a tool, so I have to use different options. Yeah, I started using teleport more aggressively because it was a way that I could try to get around the zoning. That's why also when people come in and they say, hey, Sajam, what do you think about X or Y example or B or C example? Or how do you fight against this character or that character? The point of me bringing this up is not so that I can tell you how every matchup archetype breaks down, but the point of this is to get you to understand that you should be thinking about these things when learning fighting games. And not just learning fighting games, watching fighting games as well. You should think to yourself, which character is the aggressor? Does this character being the aggressor mean they have to take more risks, or because they're the aggressor and their tools are so strong against the defensive character, do they not even have to worry about taking risks? Do they just run the other character over and the defensive character has to take risks to stop them from getting in? In some matchups, the aggressor is so strong at getting in that the defensive player is forced to constantly make, low impact or weak decisions just to try to survive before they get in. Manat is fighting some rushdown character who gets in really easy against her. She's jump back jabbing. She's, scared to throw her orb. She's like constantly fishing with like big buttons to try to keep them out because she's scared they're going to get in. And then she ends up giving up a lot of space because of it. What archetype is Ed? What archetype do you think Ed is? How would you describe? I mean, I'm assuming Ed is your character, right? What are his strengths? What does he do? Rushdown, but not a very good one. I mean, that's character strength, right? That doesn't have to do with what he's trying to do. You classify Ed as a rushdown character. Are there matchups where Ed is the defender, though? Probably, right? There are matchups where he can use his fireballs and anti-airs to play defensively. He can play both. He can play slow or he can play fast. You see what I'm saying? G is rushdown with extra steps. Dude, have you ever watched G versus Zangief? That character is not playing aggressive. G's goal is to get a level and never let Zangief near him. He has a fireball that is very strong. And he can play mid-range much more. He doesn't have to be the aggressor in every matchup. You should watch a G versus Zangief. It's one of the most miserable matchups in the game, I think, actually. Yeah, if you're fighting a zoning character and you think, oh, the zoning character must play defensive, so I can just sit at full screen and do something else, the zoner can start putting pressure on you if you don't have an answer for their zoning. If Guile's a defensive character, right? He's a zoner. But if you're letting him throw light boom and walk up to you, you're letting him be the aggressor in those situations, right? If you're not putting enough pressure on him to be afraid, then he can play aggressive against you. And if a rushdown character gets the life lead, they can force a zoner to come to them. It's the same idea. You don't have to be, it's not like one or the other, right? These things change mid-match. Yeah, zoning is more than just projectiles. Zoning can be how you move from your opponent, the position you put yourself, the normals you use. How would I apply this to Tekken? The exact same way. What do the characters want to do? The point of this discussion, right, thinking about what is my character trying to do, what is my opponent's character trying to do, is to figure out what your opponent wants to do to win. What are they doing to win? What are their goals? What are their strong tools? What are their weak tools? What should you expect? What shouldn't you expect against them? The point of asking these questions and trying to assign these roles is to get you to think. Just think about it. Like, what is my opponent trying to do against me here? Right? What is my opponent trying to do there? Tasty Steve versus Sajam's arm. One is clearly the aggressor there. The other one is clearly dying.